So we'll call the meeting to order at 7:03. This is the July 1st, 2020 Milton Select Board meeting. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Now we'll take item 3, public comment. So we're now in Zoom webinar, which is slightly different. And Hillary has kindly put up some directions for us. So if you move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, you'll see an icon for raise hand. And for people who are using phones, they can press *9 to raise their hand and press *6 to toggle their mute on and off. And then Hillary will let us know who would like to speak.
Madam Chair, you have caller ending in 838 wishing to be recognized.
Okay. Caller 838, would you please give us your name and your address, and we would be happy to hear from you.
My name is Phil Johanning. My address is 23 Parkwood Drive in Milton. What I wanted to talk about was the Greater Boston program on WGBH, where Zakiya Jarrett appeared. She's a resident of Milton and a middle school teacher. And I felt shame over her presentation on that program, her responses to questions from Jim Browdy. She had mentioned, one of the things that troubled me was that she said the apology from Mr. Fish and Ms. Gormley, she received an apology, but she wasn't sure that the apology was for what it should have been for. Now, of course, maybe she misunderstood, but I see that as a lack of sincerity. She also said that she would never discuss race again, which I think is a shame. I think that's a current topic that needs to be discussed, particularly in middle school. She also said that she has seen a chilling effect on her colleagues regarding the race issue. I'd say that shouldn't be. The thing that troubles me more, though, is that I believe that laws were broken. And the law I'm talking about is Mass General Law, Chapter 272, Section 99. 99C says, interception of oral communications is prohibited. And it says that there will be a fine of not more than $10,000 or imprisonment in the state prison for not more than 5 years. And it says disclosure or use of wire or oral communications is prohibited. And it also talks about imprisonment and fines for that as well. I think the first is a felony and the second is a misdemeanor. And I took a look at, what does this, what are the details surrounding this? And it says that, written in 1968, the statute recognizes the uncontrolled development and unrestricted use of electronic recording, which poses grave dangers to the privacy of all citizens of the Commonwealth. Therefore, the secret use of such devices by private individuals must be prohibited. And also that it says under mass law, secret recording is illegal, even if the person being recorded does not have an expectation of privacy in the conversation in question, meaning that in Massachusetts, it is illegal to secretly record conversations, even in public places where the speaker knows that others may overhear. As a federal district court in Massachusetts explained in 2017, there is a difference between overhearing a conversation and recording and then rebroadcasting a conversation. So what does this mean to me? It means to me that there probably needs to be some type of an investigation. I understand from the town's website that all volunteers and all employees of the town would be treated equally in this regard. And so it appears to me that whoever recorded this, and I feel quite certain that someone in the schools knows who made the recording, that person's name or that person should be investigated because they clearly made a recording of what should have, that recording should not have occurred without the teacher's consent. And so that appears to be potentially a felony, and that person's name is most likely known, and that should be turned over to someone, maybe the district attorney of Norfolk County. Also, I feel that Mr. Fish and Ms. Gormley probably should be investigated for a misdemeanor because, they used information that was, let's say, illegally obtained to reprimand or discipline the teacher. So I feel that the town has more work to do. Perhaps they should hire the town's law firm to investigate this issue. I don't think the police should probably investigate it. Probably it should be turned over to the district attorney as there's a conflict of interest. But I go back to an email written by Mr. Wells to the district attorney, Michael Morrissey, where he said, while I'm new to this role, my understanding of the parameters of the law in the Commonwealth are not. The public holds us to the rule of law as it should. MGL 272-99 was enacted to protect the privacy interests of our citizens. While I am sad to report this, my decades in policing, as well as the protections provided under MGL 272-99, warrant an impartial and immediate review for possible criminal action. I think his words the town went forward with his thoughts in that email to Michael Morrissey, and I think the town should go forward investigating what happened to Zakiya Jarrett, because not only do Black lives matter, but Black people matter. And I feel that the chilling effect that this disciplinary action had on her and her colleagues should never have occurred. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning.
Madam Chair, at this time, there are no additional members of the public wishing to be recognized.
Okay. Very good. Then we move on to item 4. Thank you, Hillary. That's the public meeting about the residences at East Milton. So there have been proposed revisions by the project proponents. And I believe that I saw Ms. Corcoran and Mr. McReynolds, and also just so people are aware, the board's consultant, Judy Barrett, who's been helping us draft our responses to the project eligibility letters, has also joined us. Hillary, is there a presentation that we're going to be watching? Thank you. And are you promoting Ms. Corcoran to be a panelist so she can speak, or are we?
Yes, Ms. Corcoran and Mr. McReynolds have both been promoted.
Okay, great, thank you, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time. There you are, I now see you. There's a lot of people to look at. Hello. We're interested, and waiting to hear from you. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the Select Board for having us here tonight to present the updates on the residences at East Milton, which is our 40B proposal in East Milton Square. We took the comments that we heard during the initial comment period lasting from February until April to heart, and we kind of went back to the drawing board and have what we feel is a brand new building at this point. So we're excited to share it. We can go to the next slide, Hillary, please. So this is just a recap. If you're like me, you might have to move where the people are talking in your screen to see the rest of it. But this is just an overview of the process where we've been so far. So just a reminder that we are in the very first phase of the 40B application process. So this is the time at which the state is determining whether this project is eligible to receive a comprehensive permit. So we'll receive a project eligibility letter from Mass Housing. If everything is looking better, then we will expect that by the late summer. And then sometime over the late summer or early fall, we'll be filing a comprehensive permit, which goes directly to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that is a process in which Milton is completely in charge of the process. It will involve another public comment period with more time for review. The comprehensive permit will also have further studies. So there will be a traffic impact analysis, stormwater management plan, as well as an engineering plan, and then additional studies as the town requests them. So we can go to the next slide. So just to reiterate some of the benefits to the town of Milton. Number one, there will be a further tax benefit from this site. $280,000 in new tax revenue generated on this site on an annual basis, as well as $600,000 in the fees that are related to the construction and the approval and permitting process. And additionally, since the town is now looking at a 40R zone in this area, if this project were to go forward as presented here today, it would include an additional $500,000 to the town in 40R payments from the state. The other really important thing that I think is important to highlight is that, you know, the housing options in Milton right now, 17% of the housing stock or thereabout is rental housing, and the rest is home ownership. And additionally, Milton is still at about 5% of its housing stock as affordable on the subsidized housing index. So if this project moves forward, Milton will also be entitled to what they call a safe harbor. So that would give the town some time to further plan for what more affordable housing they want to see to reach the goal of 10%. But it would provide 2 years in which to do that without being subject to further 40B submissions. So we can go to the next slide. So the context of the site, I'm sure that most people on this call are familiar, but the site is bordered by Franklin Street, Bassett Street, and Adams Court. It's a really great location. The square is really the hub of Milton, and we think that it would provide a really great place for multifamily housing, given its walkable access to CVS, groceries, restaurants, the gym, services, really so many places that people in town frequent on a regular basis. All walkable. So we can go to the next slide. So the previous plans, we'll go quickly over these because I know that everyone wants to see the new stuff. So a 40B development, 5 to 6 story buildings, and with 111 units and 136 parking spaces. Let me go to the next slide. This is just a quick, a brief look at what will never be built. So we can go to the next slide. I'm sure everyone's seen these. So this is the new design, which we're really excited about. We were able to make some major changes. The elevations on Bassett Street are now 4 stories, and we shifted the architecture and the design of the building to really look like more of a townhouse feel. We added new materials, kind of broke the building up so that it wouldn't appear so monolithic. That was one comment that we got a lot on the design front. We also increased the setback. So you'll see where all the plantings and the benches are at the corner of Bassett and Franklin, that there will be places to sit, offer a quick respite on your way, you know, between errands or something. as well as kind of an improved pedestrian experience. The widening of the sidewalks was something that we heard loud and clear on our site walk with Mass Housing, and just that was another resounding comment that we had. So we can go to the next slide. These are some of the visuals that we've been using as inspiration for what the public realm should look like on Bassett Street and on Franklin Street. So as you round that corner, a super wide sidewalk with plantings on both sides. It narrows a little bit as you get closer to Franklin, and then Franklin, it also has landscaping and trees, but that was something that was important to the team. So we go to the next slide. So this is another visual of the building from the Bassett Street side, as if you're standing in the parking lot for the fruit center. The outline to the right of the image, and the new images, we included this to give people an idea of what future development might look like in the square. So to the right, you'll see that denotes 45 feet. So that's what's currently buildable under current zoning in the buildings that are abutting this building. But as you can see, as you go towards, a lot more greenery as you're rounding the corner, and just more variety in the building typology, and a roof deck as well. So we think that will be a great amenity, and make a friend in the building so you can get invited up for a drink. Next slide, please. So the numbers on this one, we shaved 10 units off. So we're at 101 units, which would still be eligible for that $200,000 payout for the 40R program, if that ends up happening. The unit mix is slightly more skewed towards studios and 1 bedrooms, with 19% of the building being 2 bedrooms, and then 10% as required under the 40D program as 3 bedrooms. Still with 25% affordability, so that would mean 26 units towards the of affordable housing in Milton, and 130 parking spaces. So we shaved off 10 units, but only 6 parking spaces. So we considered that kind of a win as well. So we can go to the next slide. This is another view of the building from the Starbucks. And so as you can see, the building next door is zoned to be that height if future development ever were to occur. And again, just shifting the building so that it's a little bit more interesting to look at, and more variety on the facade. So this is just a quick comparison so we can really look at it. We've discussed everything here, but also important to note that all 101 units, despite losing 2 affordable units, will all be eligible on the SHI. So it gets you a full 1 percentage point towards that 10% goal. We can go to the next slide. Another comparison and just kind of outlining the depiction, just so that everybody knows too. We're going through pretty quickly because I want to be able to get some questions and comments in, but our website is up and running. It has been for a little while. So it's residents@eastmilton.com, and you can view all of the images there as well as this whole presentation. So we can go to the next slide. Oh, that's it. Okay. So I kind of jumped the gun on the website plug. But we really do want this to be an interactive process. As you can see, so many changes were made just based on the first comment period. The next one will actually be longer. So there will be more time for more back and forth, and you're encouraged to reach out to me directly via email, call, text. That is my cell phone number. So I don't know if this is a good idea, but we really do want to interact with everybody and get people's opinions. We'll have a mailing list as well that you can sign up for. So for project updates and just general project information. So thank you very much, and looking forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you. Let me just change my view there. Members of the board, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, I think there's a hand up in the attendees. I'm wondering if that's Richard. Yeah, Richard has his hand
Oh,
up.
great, thank you. I missed that. Thank you. Richard, it's *6 to unmute.
I got it.
Okay, great, thank
I
you.
got it. I was *9 trying to get my hand up. So, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So are we going to take comments? I'd rather take comments if are we going to take comments from the public and all, or is it just us?
Yes, that's next.
All right, so I'd rather hear what listen to the public first and then reserve any comments to the
Okay.
end, if that's okay with you. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Hillary, for some reason, my list has, I need to write a couple more down. Okay. So a couple of reminders. We'll do again the process that we did before, that people who wish to speak can raise their hand and then they'll be recognized. And if you're on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And then when you're recognized, you press *6 to toggle your mute on and off. So we're still in the project eligibility letter phase. And just as a reminder, because it's been a little while due to COVID, there are 3 things under the purview of Mass Housing that they award an eligibility letter for, and I'll just run over those briefly. One is that the project is generally appropriate for residential development. 2 is that the conceptual design is generally appropriate for the site, considering massing, topography, environmental resources, and integration into current development patterns. And the third one, which may be a little less for us to talk about today because it requires data, is that the project appears financially feasible. So those are the 3 things that they're concentrating on, and the things that, according to federal fair housing and state laws, that we are not that are not eligible for discussion are things that would violate people's civil rights. So talking about race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, and age, just as a reminder for people. And with that, we're eager to hear from people. So Hillary, do we have 2 people? Yes, so we have Mr. Coyle and no, we have 3. Mr. Tuger, I may have pronounced your name wrong, and 3, 1040. So if you don't mind, I'll take you in order. Mr. Coyle. We did receive we did receive your email, but we're happy to hear from you. So if you could, Hillary, is he able to speak now?
Yes, Madam Chair.
I see. Okay. Hello, Mr. Coyle.
Hello, this is Jim Coyle on Bunton Street, East Milton. I did send an email to Mr. Dennehy late yesterday afternoon, but I want to go over the highlights of what my comments are. I don't think I shared it with the entire board, so. But
we have received
I'll
it, though, and
go through this quickly here.
Yes.
Most of my comments are repeats from the last meeting that we had, which was in person. The world has certainly changed. I guess number 1 on my list of topography, and I'm sticking to bullet point number 2 on the official list of questions that were issued to the town. The one about the conceptual design being appropriate. The topography, several neighborhood residents raised a serious question about runoff from the site, and for this site and Adams Street, causing basement flooding at homes along Franklin Street, which has persisted for a number of years. Prior proposals for this project included an underground infiltration system. And I guess my question is, what is the applicant proposing to do to avoid exacerbating the situation? And are Mr. Dennehy and the town engineer and perhaps others in the town involved in responding to the request, the official request for comments. I mean, several people raised this question, and related to that, at a recent Milton Town meeting on June 15th, there was a new warrant article about number 37 about stormwater management. I guess, is this project subject to the requirements of that new Milton bylaw? And what are the plans for an underground infiltration system? And related to this, historically, from my understanding, all of the runoff from Adams Street and most of East Milton connects to one large pipe north of the food center and goes under the highway and comes out the other side. I understand it's rather old, but it was enlightening to me to hear from the Franklin Street neighborhood about the serious, but they already have a serious problem. And I believe, you know, it's part of a larger system. And I hope that the applicant is taking all this into account and will work constructively with the town so as not to make the problem worse. So that's kind of my question here. And should I just go through all of them quickly, or do you want to do this one at a time?
So I can address that really quickly, depending on if we'd like to do it a different way. But we will, in the next comprehensive permit that we'll be submitting to the ZBA, have a stormwater management plan that will address that. And then we'll continue to get, the plan really continues to get more finite as we go forward. The first plan is very preliminary, but we continue to do more studies as requested by the town. This is my first time we're hearing about the pipe under the highway, but these are all things that we'll look into. And so we'll definitely be doing that in the future.
I mean, these questions were raised more than 2 years ago at previous select board meetings and never really answered. So it's a bone of contention with the people in our neighborhood. Second thing, there are existing environmental conditions. There are 5 markers along the upper end of Abbott Court there indicating the presence of monitoring wells. My question is your company aware of these? What is the status of them? And related to that, has an updated environmental site investigation been conducted and submitted to the town of Milton?
So again, not yet, but we will be doing a phase 1 ESA. And then if that produces any results that would lead to a phase 2, we will conduct that study as well.
Okay. My third point is integration into the existing development plans. And this is specifically, you know, related to the bullet point number 2 in the questions. Restaurants along Adams Street have agreements with Falcone companies for use of parking on the subject property is a condition of obtaining their approvals from the town boards. Does the applicant plan to do the same and allow shared parking on the subject property so as to limit usable number of spaces for residents of this new project? This was a huge bone of contention with the prior developer. And I think and the world has certainly changed, but keep in mind that more people will be working from home since the current trend will likely continue. So I'm interested to hear what is the understanding with the town of Milton at this point?
So at this point, we are planning to keep that parking available for the restaurants since it was a condition of the restaurant's permits. And so we, as you can see on the numbers, we've got 29 spaces that are unaccounted for. Generally, there's really no way to anticipate specifically the number of cars people will bring, but renters en masse have, will traditionally have fewer cars than, a single family home. And so the 130 parking space number that we have right now, we're comfortable with, but there are also some ways that we can increase that, whether it's through electric vehicle parking, compact car parking. So we'll continue to rejigger that number and try to get it higher if we can, but the 130 is somewhere that we're comfortable with knowing the market.
I think that's something, well, related. I'm certainly not comfortable with that. I think the norm out there in the world is we should have one parking space plus guest spaces and also accessible spaces without shared uses at all. I think it's not practical to rely on sharing spaces. I think the world has changed. Everybody's working from home, and we're not going to go back to the way it was before COVID-19. We're just not. I think that's an unrealistic approach. And I think you need to work constructive with Milton. I think that's a problem. And I'm going to jump into my next point here is about fire safety and safety for traffic. This is item number 5 on my email to the select board and Mr. Dennehy. Number one, there's one thing that concerns me very much is that if there was a fire in the drive under section of the building off of Franklin Street, fire trucks and emergency vehicles would be restricted to only the Adams Court approach to the rear of the complex. I believe this is unwise and unnecessary, especially for a new project. My recommendation to the Milton people here is the applicant developer should pay for a safety study performed by a fire safety consultant selected by Milton town officials. I think Milton as a town needs to step up to the plate here and improve its capabilities. The fire department are already very busy. We need an outside safety consultant here that's acceptable to Milton and paid for by developer. And maybe this is part of your project anyway, but it's a specific requirement for a project in the surrounding towns, for example, there are larger ones around here, Attleboro and Quincy, for example, where I've done some work. The fire department, nothing even gets to the planning department or for approvals at all. And there's several meetings with the fire marshal, and I think Milton is a small town. I think it needs outside resources that are very focused on this. You know, we have a 6-story building here. How does that, a simple question, how does that affect the fire trucks that we have and are looking to expand? I mean, this is not it needs an in-depth study. And related to that, in other towns around here, in Quincy and Chelsea and other places, the Attleboro, there's a requirement to submit traffic flow plans for all the fire safety trucks, you know, showing the details of that. This is a must for this project here, that the engineering firm working for you needs to produce all those drawings so that it's clear to the town that we have a safe situation. We have existing businesses here that are probably hoping to reopen soon, you know, that are right immediately adjacent. And I'm very concerned about the safety during this project. Are you going to be using a tower crane in the middle of this project? How are you going to keep the neighborhood safe and also keep those 30 spaces, whatever they are, available for the restaurants that depend on them now? There's a lot that needs to be done here, and I would hate to see this project rush through and not allow enough time for comments from the public.
Well, Mr. Coyle, may I interrupt you just there? Excuse me, but these are excellent comments, and we will also forward them on to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that's where a lot of this detail comes in. We're only in the project eligibility letter phase, and in those three buckets that Mass Housing will use to decide whether to award a project eligibility letter. So, these more detailed the studies and things, that is definitely part of the Zoning Board of Appeals process. And I just wanted to allay your concerns about that it would be rushed through, and that the Zoning Board of Appeals would not appropriately vet everything. And the select board would be, or will be, making sure that all the downtown departments vet all the plans, ask for additional analysis that's needed, and Milton's also eligible for additional technical assistance from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. So we do have some good resources, and feedback like this is going to be invaluable to that process.
No, yeah, related, I want to just follow up on one point on truck traffic and truck safety there. I mean, people in the neighborhood you see people are out walking a lot more now. I think that's going to continue here. And right now, if a tractor trailer truck has to deliver something to Abbey Park or Brugger's or something, parking on Anna Granite Avenue, Adams Street, right in the middle.
Mhm.
Horribly unacceptable and unsafe. This building needs to be pulled back from Franklin Street and created an official Milton-approved truck unloading zone in East Milton, or this project shouldn't go ahead at all. I think it's very unsafe design at this point. Enough thought has not been put in. I'm concerned by the time it gets to the ZBA, it's too late. The developer here, I don't think it's unfair to them. I need to see the people of East Milton want to see a stronger input from Mr. Dennehy, the DPW, the town engineer, the fire chief. At this stage here right now, I think it'd be too late and unfair to the developer. The issues, that current safety issues in East Milton, truck traffic, the truck routing to the fruit market is a struggle. I'd like to see this developer work right now with the appropriate people and not wait to the zoning board. I think that's too late. And it's not the way it's done in other towns at all. It just isn't. So in my suggestion to my email to Mr. Dennehy, I included 3 examples in there. Well, the one I like the most here that's closest to this one is 104 Washington Street in Quincy, which I understand is a very short walk from the offices of the Corcoran Company. They added a little, at the corner of Washington Street and McGrath Highway, there's a 4-story building with garage access from the ground level. And it would have been right at the corner of Washington Street and McGrath Highway. But smartly, they put in a little access road almost, a one-way, to get the traffic flow out of the main traffic. And that's on the main road here. We're trying to put this building, I'm going to make my last point here related to this. This is not an urban block at all. This is trying to put a very large project on side streets. It's not out on the main road. I think I would suggest that the developer look at 104 Washington Street for a very good example of how to do this project smarter. It's a 4-story building with garage access from ground level. They added a little one-way street called Y-Bird to separate the garage access from the traffic flow. The residential neighborhood is in the back of this project. If this project was on Granite Avenue or Adams Street directly, it would be entirely different. I couldn't find you to put it on a side street, a pair of side streets that are narrow and congested already, and have a very dangerous intersection at the corner of Franklin and Bassett is a mistake. It's a big mistake at this point here. And that's why this truck routing, the surrounding towns require truck routing and fire safety be settled down before you even meet with the planning board or the zoning board at all. And I think that's a must. I think Mr. Dennehy and his team need to step up to the plate here and take some corrective action right now. You cannot wait till the ZBA. That's too late. That's not their expertise. They're more into legal aid and zoning issues and things like that. That's way too late. This week here was a lousy, there's so many people out of town right now. We're not going to have a lot of people even on this phone call, even be involved. They're trying to get on with their life. And I think my main complaint is with the town of Milton, Mr. Dennehy, the DPW, get the town engineer, get out there now and get involved and talk to the people and find out, solve the problems you already have. truck traffic is a huge safety problem. And we got a blind corner at the corner of Bassett and Franklin. It's a blind corner. Safety is huge in this project here right now. To put in a large building, which I think is still way too big, in a tiny piece of property. I did a little quick survey on the Mass Housing website, and I looked at a few surrounding towns out there. I looked in Wellesley, Weston, Brookline, and Plymouth. I couldn't find any projects, and I looked about a dozen of them that were as dense as this one at all. The other projects being proposed in Milton don't have anywhere. This is 4 times as dense as those projects. And all these other ones, even the Brookline, which has a lot of congested areas, has green space and setbacks. This has almost none. So I think it's a huge stretch to get this project through the system at all here. And I'd like to see it maybe cut in half again, something that has a real neighborhood look. This doesn't even come close to that. So I've submitted my comments in writing. I wanted the public to hear it and the East Milton Neighborhood Association people as well. We did not get a chance to have a neighborhood association meeting at all. You know, people are busy with their life, and it's try doing anything by Zoom is just awkward. Yeah, so anyway, I think I've said enough. I think I got my point across. I think it's time for, if Jennifer, if you want to follow up on that, I'd be glad to hear. But I'd like to hear from Mr. Dennehy. What are you going to do to make this project better for the town? Because at the end of the day, if there's a lot of costs here, that who is responsible? If we have to do a major upgrade of the stormwater drainage system in this area, who pays for that? I think the developers should pay for that. They're the one that's going to make the money in the long run. There was very nicely, the drawings were impressive. The work you've done is very impressive. And I certainly think you have the capability of working really constructively with the town of Milton here and its residents. We need a lot more before it's too late. So my concern, who's going to pay for all these costs if the infrastructure and all that is just not adequate? That's
Madam Chair, if I might.
one.
Yes,
Anyway, I think I'm done.
thank you. Mr. Zulus, did you want to say something?
Madam Chair, Mike Denny, if I could respond. Yeah,
There you are.
very similar, Mr. Coyle, to the letter that was submitted by the Select Board with the help of the consultant, Judy Barrett, on April 21st to Mass Housing, the first letter that went back for the project eligibility. There were several comments in there from department heads identifying specific requests that you mentioned tonight, pedestrian safety, traffic safety, all of that stuff. And collectively, all of the department heads this week, including new Fire Chief Chris Madden, will be submitting these comments again, and it will become a part of the letter that my Select Board, with the help of Judy Barrett, will submit to Mass Housing again. But if you look at the April 21st letter, it does contain comments from department heads in town who have been working through this new updated. We've got comments from the Building Commissioner, Joe Prondek. Today, he has some concerns with it. John Thompson has some similar concerns. So this is an active discussion with the department heads, including the planning board has a chance to add their comments to it. And very similar to the letter that was submitted on April 21st, you'll see comments from department heads in town with their concerns or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dennehy. Yes, I just want to add, this is a 40B process, and so it's a little different from the typical planning process. And our departments will, when plans are produced, they will go over them. And the project proponents have said that they want to engage with the community and they will be working with the town at the same time. So as you heard, that the application isn't ready to go. There's not even a project eligibility letter. So there are stages that they haven't gone through yet because they haven't been required to. and they're not going to go along and do certain kinds of plans until they have a concept that they're ready to put forward. And so the town is in there and working with whatever information we have at the time, and we'll continue to work together. As Ms. Corcoran said, they're looking at late summer, early fall. Okay, I would like to get to everyone else. So let's see. Actually, I see that Mr. Wells's hand is raised. Did you wish to say something, Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to remind you, I thought I heard Jerry Tower is waiting on the line up there. That's all I wanted to remind you that.
Yes,
I thought I heard you mention that he was waiting. Okay, that's all. I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so if Mr. Tower, if you could unmute yourself, we'd like to hear from you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Jerry Tauger. Many of you, I think, know me at this point. I'm a 40-plus year resident of East Milton. I'm also one of the seniors living in East Milton who this project is purportedly attractive to. And I would simply like to comment very briefly on that it would, as a senior and a homeowner, it would cost me a lot more to live in one of the Corcoran's proposed one-bedroom apartments, looking at the numbers in their proposal, than it would cost me to live in my 4-bedroom home. So and it would also, in comparison to other comparison properties that they included in their original proposal, they are offering fewer square feet for more money than their matchmates. So I find that very problematic. An additional thing I find problematic is that in something that is ostensibly attractive to seniors, as I recall, there were only 6 handicapped accessible apartments. Now, for any senior relocating, this is something which, at least thinking in the long term, is a necessity. Okay, so I just wanted to make those comments briefly since that issue was raised again by Ms. Corcoran. But my real purpose in speaking is just to reinforce the points made in Jim Coyle's letter and to emphasize the point that this represents not only Jim Coyle's view, but it does represent the view of the East Milton Neighborhood Association, of the East Milton Neighborhood Association's board, of which I'm a member, and of the East Milton community, which I've been a part of for a lot of years. And I think these are issues we feel very strongly about. I want to reiterate that point. I'll stop my comments there.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Tauger. Would you mind giving us your address as well?
Yes, it's 31 Rockwell Avenue.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Let's see. Okay. Please forgive me if I should say when I misspeak and don't pronounce people's names correctly. The 1040.
Hi, so there are actually 2 of us here, Adam 1040 at 644 Adams Street in East Milton, Mass, and my wife Kate 1040 at the same address. So I'll keep my comments brief because I feel that the prior outline of key concerns is really well thought out, and I also want to acknowledge that I'm totally in favor of some degree of development in East Milton Square. I do respect the rights of landowners, but I also think the rights of the community need to be balanced in creating a plan that would work for everyone. We're now 3 years from the initial proposal, and there's been numerous meetings trying to determine something that would work for both groups. This has been outlined very well in the letter that was responded to with this updated proposal. the 2 points that I think have really not been addressed is, first off, the size. There's a lot of concerns about the safety of the people that would live in this community, the scope and the magnitude of the building. And, when these conversations started back in 2017, we were talking about something in the range of 71 units. This current proposal went from 111 units to 101 units and remains 6 stories in height. I think there have been some great efforts for aesthetics, but the reality is this is still quite a dense proposal for such a small space and land. And there's a lot of concerns about the safety of those that would be living there, traffic, and a lot of other aspects that would affect the surrounding community. The second is this comment on green space, and I do appreciate the efforts to improve the aesthetics of the project. I think the green space is important, especially for those that are going to live in the building and those around it that would like to enjoy seeing the building. However, it is worth noting that in this revised proposal, there's a very similar budget. So it's hard for me to understand how this project is really expanding the scope of the green space as was reported as being one of the key things that was being addressed. So in summary, look, I'm in favor of seeing some degree of development. I don't know if people need to literally spell out the exact number of units, but I think what needs to be recognized is the community is not excited about a triple-digit size project that's six stories in height. It's just a really tough space for everyone to fit into that area. And I think a more reasonable project, probably about half that size, 3 to 4 stories tall. I mean, if it needs to literally be spelled out for the developers, that's what a lot of people in East Milton have been talking about and would be very reasonable. So it would be great to see us moving more towards that target. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kate 1040, and I think my comments are going to be pretty similar to what I said at the meeting back in April, I think it was. When talking to a lot of different people in the neighborhood, I've heard a bunch of people say that they feel like they're on an island. We just feel like we're getting progressively more and more cut off from the rest of town, and is the one part of town that actually has a thriving commercial base. That seems a little not like wise planning. And I know that the town is in the process of trying to plan out how to make the square run more efficiently. And one of the things in your letter from a few months ago was asking for more time for that. So I think that would be really wise to continue working toward that and having the developer work with you toward that goal. The traffic of the past week as they've repaved Adams Street and parts of Swanham Street on these back roads here was a really good reminder of what would be in store for during the construction process, and then potentially even after the construction process with an additional 101 units worth of people commuting through. I was horrified when I got to the intersection of Franklin and Bassett around 4 p.m. last Wednesday when this traffic first got started. People were just like flying through that intersection, not stopping at the stop sign, which is not the developer's fault, of course, but that's just a reminder of how overstretched these back roads have become. And I grew up in Milton and then was gone for a long time. I lived in California for about 10 years. And I just feel like coming back from the perspective, the neighborhood we were in California had very quickly added a lot of offices and apartment buildings. And we really saw the commercial base suffer. A lot of small restaurants and stores closed. And then even the stores that were doing well, like Starbucks, were really struggling because their employees couldn't find anywhere to park. So I just can imagine that happening with a huge project of this size coming in here. And I'd like to end by just saying I'm absolutely in favor of development in the area, and absolutely in favor of more housing, especially affordable housing. This area has gotten really expensive, and I would love for more families to be able to like find a place to raise their families. But this really just feels like an example of a developer squeezing as much as he can out of a small parcel of land at the expense of the surrounding neighborhoods and businesses. So I hope we can continue to work toward a more reasonable number of units that will benefit the whole community.
Thank you.
And also, I know that Shane Shaughnessy would like to speak. You might already know that. She just wasn't sure if I didn't hear her name read. And
Right. No, They're up next. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Shaughnessy family, I think you're unmuted.
Madam Chair, the Shaughnessy family is using an older version of Zoom, and I need to promote them to panelists for them to be able to speak.
Okay.
With your permission, I can do that.
Yes, please do so. Hello. Whenever you're ready to speak.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for having this meeting. Thank you for the Corcorans for working with the community here. But I feel this is a little bit of deja vu. We went through this whole thing with the Falcones already, where they had an original plan, downsized, and now we're going through this whole thing again. So, with that being said, we saw more of a more plans that the there was a more comprehensive application that was submitted, and in that they mentioned about building parallel to Adams Court, and they weighed the pros and cons of developing in that property, or developing in that way. We just haven't seen any proposals about what this would look like, or any community engagement and how this would affect the community. I wanted to see if the Corcorans could more explore this option to the community, and if it would resolve some of the issues that the community has with this project about the size and the scale and the traffic. I think we'd like to see more of a plan and see what that would look like, and more options going forward to that. I know one of the things they stated that this, they're looking for the best urban design placement for this, and they didn't think that building parallel to Adams Court would work with that. But I'd like to see, maybe some proposals with that. And I think it's kind of counterintuitive that they're using the wordage urban design when this is going into a town. So those are just my comments, and my wife wants to talk a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shane Shaughnessy. We reside at 30 Franklin Street, otherwise known as the direct abutters to this project. I don't want to sound repetitive. I feel like my comments are the same as what they were over the winter, or spring rather. And I think Mr. Coyle and Mr. Tuger have reiterated everything that we have said. Like my husband said, we do appreciate that the Corcoran Falcone team has attempted to alter the original plans. And I noticed that Ms. Corcoran said in her letter that they had listened to the neighborhood and the neighbors, and they really tried to work on this. What I have to say is, in all due respect, we need to work harder. This is 1 acre of land in a neighborhood that they're wanting to put 101 units in. That is, I don't understand how anyone could think that that was a feasible plan. The last plan that we had gotten down to, again with the Falcone team, seemed a bit more reasonable. It definitely, aesthetic-wise, looked more residential. But you're talking about putting so many people, so many cars in a place that cannot handle many more people, and definitely not many more cars. And to reiterate Kate's point with the whole traffic situation, I was sitting outside yesterday, horrified. We have 3 small children, and I cannot even let them outside during the day because people are blowing through the stop sign. Yes, there's a bit of construction, but it is like this all the time. The safety concern is the biggest concern that we have, selfishly, because it's our children and our children in the neighborhood. This neighborhood is loaded with kids, and people keep moving here because they want to live here, to raise a family in a neighborhood, and that's exactly what it is. Yes, we abut a business district, but half of this project is in a neighborhood. It's in a residential district, zoned residential. It's a major, major concern for us. It's a privacy concern. Our light, our privacy, everything is going away with this project. And to reiterate again, Adam's point, we are not against any sort of affordable housing or development in the neighborhood, but 101 units is just not close to being fit. It's just not. I'm sure I have 1,000 other things to say, but I don't want to sound repetitive, and I will reissue another email to Mr. Dennehy just to go on record again, but this is a huge concern for us as a family and us as a neighborhood, and we just really ask that the Corcoran Falcone team look at this. And I understand that the 72 units or the 66 or the 52, whatever it wound up with last time, was not financially feasible. And I'm going to say this again, we do not want to be part of the reason that somebody made a bad financial decision on 1 acre of land. It's not fair to us or the families that live here. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaughnessy. Appreciate your comments. I just wanted to recognize that Representative Driscoll has joined us, and I do see that Mr. Joe Henning has his hand up. Mr. Joe Henning, would you like to comment?
Hi, yes, good evening. It's John Rowe at 23 Parkwood Drive.
Yeah. John, it's you. Yes, Mr. Rowe. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My only comment is I'm a proponent of affordable housing. My concern here is that the proposal is a 6-story wooden apartment building. And I don't think anyone should live in a 6-story wooden apartment building because I don't think it's safe. And I just want everyone to think about, would you want your children to live in that building? It should be a concrete building. Any building over 4 stories tall should be made of concrete and reinforced concrete. And I'm just very concerned that anyone is even considering a 6-story wooden apartment building in East Milton Square.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Is that your main comment?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
And it should not allow a 6-story wooden apartment building to be built in Milton. We see them built in Boston and Quincy, Waltham. We see them burning down. And we don't need this here in Milton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wells, your hand is up, and I'm not sure if it is up from before or if you'd like to speak again, but I don't see.
That's from before, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think that concludes the residents who would like to speak. Oh, no, I stand corrected. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, if you, yes, there you are.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks. Bob Kelly, 65 Franklin Street. I had a question. Has the town heard from Mass Housing in terms of the proposed extension or kind of a slowdown of this whole project? I know that was proposed in your original response.
Yes, and it was denied. This response is now due on the 8th. So that's why we're holding this meeting, because they only gave us 2 weeks. So we had to have time. We received it, and then we had to have time to post the agenda, and thus this meeting, and then it's due back to them on the 8th.
And is the developer willing to, pause any of this process?
I couldn't speak to that.
Is Ms.
Are we-
Cochran still there?
So, are we still talking about the 6 months?
Yeah, that was, I know the town proposed that in their,
6 months from April, when that request was made, would bring us to October. And right now we're looking at probably most likely a September submission. So we're pretty close to that, just naturally the way that things shook out. So I don't know if that answers your question.
so I guess your answer was you weren't willing to voluntarily pause the project or the application.
Voluntarily to pause. I mean, we're going to continue to talk to people throughout, after tonight's meeting and until we submit a comprehensive permit. And, we don't really submit something or we won't submit the comprehensive permit until we're, can build some sort of support and make some adjustments that people like. So, I mean, if we're looking at September right now, that's right within kind of what the 6 months would have been already. But voluntarily starting today, we can't really stop for 6 months. We're a pretty small team, and all of our resources right now are going towards this and one other project. And so, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to wait another 6 months.
Well, I just would point out that these are extraordinary times, as you know, and forcing residents like myself, to sit through these awkward Zoom meetings in the middle of a pandemic for a project that's been kicking around for several years, and it's been widely panned.
Mm-hmm.
It's.
So what I will say, Mr. Kelly, is that, when we submit the comprehensive permit, as Madam Chair Collins has said, that kind of gives people the real stuff to chew on and the real parts of the plan to digest. And so I don't really, from a public comment, perspective, the best public comments come after you see more of the plan. So if we submit more of the plan, you'll have more of the plan to comment on. And those comment periods can be pretty long as well. And I understand that Zooms are, a little bit awkward. But I think that also accessibility wise, I'm actually kind of liking these, because I think that people who haven't come out to meetings before, because, they're always at pretty much the worst time on a weeknight when you're trying to give your kids dinner and you're trying to, get things done. I think that actually the Zoom thing makes things a little bit more accessible. So that's just my personal take, which is kind of irrelevant here. But to answer your question, I think that once you see more of the plan, then there will be more to comment on and we'll have more fruitful discussion.
Well, a lot of us have, this, as you can tell, there's a lot of comments right now with a portion of the plan. And, I would respectfully suggest, it needs more tweaking. I live a couple of 100 yards away from the site, and there's major issues. Barely an acre, and you're proposing triple-digit number of units. You don't have enough guest parking, and you're citing I don't know what your evidence is of renters having fewer cars than homeowners. I think it's the opposite. I think people who rent apartments, they have more guests than homeowners, and 30% of your proposal is 2 or 3 bedrooms. So obviously those units are going to have 2 or 3 cars. I don't think there's nearly enough parking. So I would hope that your plan can get tweaked. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I'd like to recognize Representative Driscoll. Hillary, can we make sure that he's unmuted? Yes. Hello,
Can you hear
Representative.
me okay?
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Select Board Chair, and for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to weigh in briefly that I too, respectfully share the frustrations that we're back at this number in terms of the number of units, having had so many years of conversations and negotiations take place previously. I share those same frustrations that we're now at the point we are. The two other points I agree with that have been raised in particular worth mentioning are around the size of this project, both in terms of the density, the number of units, but the sheer size of it. I like the idea of setback from the street, but at 6 stories, the project just remains far too large. And so I would hope that as this process continues to roll forward, that we see the size of this in all respects, maybe except for the parking, decrease. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I would like to give the board another chance to comment if they like or ask a question before we wrap up. No? Okay, I don't see. Richard, your hand is still up, but I'm assuming that it's from before.
No, Madam Chair, I put it up this time.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
I was waiting. I wanted to give my other colleagues a chance to speak first. So, as you know, I don't mind going last. So if someone else wants to speak first, that's fine.
No, you have the floor.
So I just want to follow up on 3 points. Mr. Coyle has reached out to me several times and sent me some very good information. I did, at his suggestion, travel to the building at the intersection of Washington and I call it Bergen Parkway, but it's actually Washington and McGrath Highway by the Quincy District Court, and saw what they did in that corner. And I kind of liked it, especially with the concerns that come to light, particularly from Shane and the Shaughnessy's, people who live right there, Bob Kelly. It is a tough intersection, and I know what they're talking about. It's just, I did like what was done in that building, and Jim Coyle was right on with what he found there. And to Jen and Sean, if this coast to your headquarters, if you think of taking a look at that, it might prove fruitful. I'm not saying it has to be identical, but I get why Quincy did it and what type of relief they were seeking, because it's a similar type of intersection, even though it's lighted, unlike this one is not. The other 2 points, and this is from Mr. Dennehy, and Jim was right on as far as us attacking this now versus waiting till later. As Katie may remember, we tried to put a loading zone on Adams Street at Franklin 4 years ago. It didn't pan out, but anyone who talks about the truck traffic, who lives here in the neighborhood, is right on it. And I'm not saying this belongs all on the Cochrans or Falcones, but this is a time for us to address it now, because you're going to add another large building. You've got Navarre, you've got Starbucks, Dunkin's, Abbey Park. They all get a lot of deliveries every day. So if there's a way we could address this and find a permanent home for a loading zone on the square, I think from a safety perspective, it's imperative. And just my last point is, because I know there'll be time to vet this out, the water issue, I've heard this repeatedly in the neighborhood over and over again. We have to make sure we address this drainage issue moving forward in this process. So thank you to everyone who made comments tonight, and thank you, Madam Chair, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wells, and I second that. Thank you for everyone who both submitted written comments, which will go on to Judy Barrett, and who spoke this evening. Yes, Conlon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a few thoughts too, and I'm going to leave the technical issues that some people raised tonight to our department heads who have a lot more technical expertise on things like drainage and stormwater than I do. But in looking at these plans, one of our speakers, I think it might have been Mr. Tenford, Tenaforde, I'm probably mispronouncing your name as well, and I apologize. I think you were the one who mentioned that there's been some aesthetic improvement, and I think that's true. I think that, I appreciate the effort that has gone into trying to redesign this building a little bit and adding some green space and some benches, but it is still a 6-story building, and even with the setback, I think on Franklin and Bassett, there's still density issues that we need to deal with. One of the things that I wanted to ask you is the parking lots on above ground. I know you have an underground parking lot, but the above ground parking lot still takes up a significant portion of the space on this lot. Is the sole reason because of the restaurant parking and the permit requirements, so that if that could somehow be creatively addressed, would that free up some space so that, as one of the recent speakers said, and I'm sorry, I forget who, Adams Court is not really being utilized other than just for parking on that side. And it would seem to me that if we could move some of this building mass off of Franklin and Bassett, but particularly right at the intersection there, that may be a way to address some of these neighbors' concerns and utilize more of the space for the apartments themselves rather than just an open area for parking. So could you maybe, if you'd like to speak to that, maybe you could give us your thoughts on that issue, Jen?
Yeah, certainly. So here's kind of the issue that we face with the parking, right? So everybody's under the impression that we need a lot of parking for the building to accommodate the residents. However, there's also a traffic issue that's been raised many times. So as developers, we're kind of in charge of, managing what we believe to be the demand, but keeping it low enough that it isn't creating additional traffic in the neighborhood. Because what you then get, if there's ample parking, 3 spaces per unit, what have you, then people are more inclined to bring cars. If going into it that there's, you're entitled to 1 space per unit, then that attracts, we're looking at 100 units here. So that's 100 households that either don't have a car or have 1 single vehicle. I'm very, very confident that in the greater Boston area, 100 of those households exist. And so in terms of adding more green space for parking, that is like my absolute dream as, an urban planning enthusiast. I mean, not urban, well, it is urban planning. That's the name of the study. It's called urban planning, neighborhood planning. I think that green space in exchange for parking is something that, as a society, we should look at a little bit more. However, we're hearing a lot of concerns from the neighborhood about even the parking limit at 130 being inadequate. So, would love to kind of have further conversations about that and kind of see, where people end up. I don't know if that answered the question.
Well, I guess my point is really not so much parking for green space as reconfiguring the parcel so that more of the density is not on Bassett and Franklin Street and is pushed back into the lot and is closer to Adams Corner, or some of the areas that you have designated for parking spaces, if that could be where part of the building is. I think some creative thinking around that issue would be helpful and would address some of these concerns. It's not going to address probably the drainage issue, but I think it would address some of the concerns that Bob Kelly and Shane Shaughnessy and others raised regarding the density and the massing. And of course, the Shaughnessy's being right across the street there, they're going to be the most impacted by shadows and by the size and the scale of the building. So if there's still some way, and I think I'm pretty sure we talked about this at the sidewalk, that if the building itself could be moved back a little bit from the street. You've done that a little bit with your setback, but there's still just a big open air parking space. And even if we're not thinking about it for green space, but we're thinking about it for reconfiguring the building somehow that puts less of a burden on the neighbors and utilizes the site a little bit differently, I think that could be a better project. But I'm not an architect or a developer, and I put that out there for your thought to think about as we're going through this process. And I do appreciate the aesthetic designs and some of the improvements in the reduction in the number of units that you've made. I do think still there's more that we need to do here, but appreciate the efforts that have gone in so far. And if we can continue to think creatively and to continue working on the 40R process that the planning board is going through, and I know you've been participating in that, so thank you for that participation. I'm hopeful that we can get to something that is a better fit for the neighborhood and meets the needs for affordable housing, but also helps ease the burden on the neighbors who would be most affected by a large development. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zulus?
Yeah, at the risk of, let me put my hand down. At the risk of repeating what Katie said, I'm confident that Mr. Dennehy and his teams and our DPW, can deal with runoff issues, can deal with the environmental conditions, working with developers, can deal with the fire safety issues, and can deal with the truck traffic issues. And that's something that we should deal with sooner rather than later, separate and apart from this project. At the end of the day, though, it seems to me where the rubber meets the road on this project is size and traffic. And that's where we need to, as good a work as the developer's done so far to try to meet some of the issues, we still have work to do on size and traffic. And it seems to me that's really what it comes down to for the neighbors and the people who live in that area is it's just size and traffic. And those are the two areas where I think we really need to do some work. So.
Thank you. And I would just add that that I agree that Mr. Dennehy and our town departments will tackle all of these things as they come, but also that we can and should look into, especially the truck loading, which I know has been a concern, and the water, because I did recently see some pictures myself. So we'll see what can be done. Okay. Seeing that there are no further members who would like to speak, I think that we're able to move on to the next item. Unless, would anyone like to hear from Judy Barrett? Would like to have a discussion with her about the letter before we move on? Well,
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Wells.
Does Judy have any additional comments she wants to make tonight? I think that's the more important question.
Mm-hmm.
Is she on the line with us?
Yes, Ms. Barrett, she's just been promoted.
Thank you. So I'm really just taking all this in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm really taking all these comments in. I don't have anything particular to add at this point, except, it's good to see things moving along. I think that we have a richer kind of concept for the site at this point. But there's clearly still a lot of discomfort with the scale. So I think there's still a lot of work to do. That's my sense of what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Barrett. Ms. Corcoran or Mr. McReynolds, before we move on, would you like to, were there any questions you felt that you didn't get to answer, or?
Trying to think. I think that, we definitely heard a lot of good points, and we're going to take these all back to the rest of the team. And I will also encourage people, again, I feel like I sound like a broken record, but I think that a lot of these questions that you might have are also very well answered on a one-on-one kind of, where we can walk you through it. Normally during this stage of the process, we would be camping out in East Milton Square and meeting, for coffees and lunches with everyone and everyone. So I wish we could do that right now. But I'm happy, as I said, to either do Zoom so you can be face-to-face in a certain way. I don't know if a social distance masked up conversation from 6 feet away is appealing to people, but we're willing to do that as well. So I just really am looking forward to talking to more people. So that's pretty much what I'll leave it with.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to remind people that the slides will be up on the website, and that website is on the last slide. So that's one way that you can contact them. So thank you. Oh, Mr. Zulus?
I think the Shaughnessy's have their hand up.
Oh, thank you. I don't have all of the, okay, there they are. Okay, let's take one more comment before we move on. All right. Oh.
Oh.
Are they here? Yes, here they are. Hello.
So just a couple of comments. One about the drainage. So I don't know if anyone after the storms recently has walked by here, but there's a handicap ramp right outside our house, and it's just a puddle there constantly. So that's one of the issues that we have to put up with drainage. Another is, you know, I'm using this as an opportunity to talk to the town, but if we can maybe do something about the trucks coming through, it's a constant all the time, and it's day and night that they come through and use the street as a cutoff. The one other thing I wanted to ask is Jen, if she can comment on what myself and Ms. Conlon were talking about moving the project off of the corner of Franklin and Bassett and moving it more towards Adams and Adams Court. Thank you.
Yeah, so a big reason we went through a bunch of different iterations of the plan while we were in this redesign, and we did look at moving that facade off of Bassett Street and into the center of the site. What that inhibits is our ability to then park the site. So our parking right now is under the building, and it works with the grade of the site to park it and allow for the amount of parking that we do have. When you move the building over, that would leave an exposed parking deck to the neighbor and to the neighborhood, and it would be, you know, elevated overhead height. I don't know the exact elevation, but you'd be looking at basically a half underground parking garage, which just from a design standpoint just wasn't something that looked very good to us. Additionally, when you move everything towards the middle of that site, as we show in the new renderings, the allowable height is 45 feet for the surrounding buildings. So if we remove our building into the middle of that site, that would mean that all of the windows would be eventually have the opportunity to be covered. And the ones on the ground floor and the second floor actually would be looking at, you know, the dumpsters from the restaurants and everything. Additionally, that would create a really intimidating looking alleyway where Adams Court is. So one of the things we talked about at the site walk was kind of activating Adams Court, so it's more of a pedestrian thoroughfare. And we eventually are going to have some cool drawings with, you know, like nice lights and public art and, you know, stuff like that, and kind of activating that Adams Court area. But if you were to put the building, if you were to kind of flip it and put the building so that it was the L shaping the other way, that would actually create kind of a canyon effect going down there. And I don't think that that would really achieve any of the kind of pedestrian thoroughfare goals. So for all of those reasons, we didn't really think that the alternative scheme where we flipped it would be feasible.
So it would be the same as now, though. Adams Court isn't utilized, and there's nothing from the neighborhood saying that we want this utilized now. We were commenting on that after the project would get built. So it would be the same as it is now, in which no one would disagree with right now. I'm just thinking that if you could maybe get creative with your design and maybe, you know, show the town a little bit of maybe some proposals of what that would look like and explore that possibility, I think that's something that the neighborhood would very much look forward to.
Ms. Conlon?
Yeah, just to follow up Mr. Shaughnessy's point, you know, I think what I'm advocating, and I think what he's advocating, and probably many of us are advocating, is just some creativity here in terms of the site, so that it's not. I take the points that you made, Jen. If it's one of the attractive points from the prior Falcone proposal for a lot of people was some commercial space along Adams Court and activating it with some, whether it's a coffee shop or a restaurant, some commercial use. That's not what you're contemplating under this new proposal. But even if it could be a lower level of the building, it's so that it's not just a matter of like flipping the L shape from one side of the parcel to the other side of the parcel, but maybe it's spreading it back so that you still have an L shape at Franklin and Bassett, but maybe it's a redesigned L shape and it has fewer stories because there's also building along the Adams Court side. creativity along those lines, I think, is worth looking at and seeing whether there's some way to address the parking garage issue that and the impact that you just raised, but so that it's not just an either or, flipping the L one way or the other way, but thinking about how it might be redesigned in a different manner. I guess that's really what I was trying to suggest. So thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands and from the board or, okay, so Ms. Corcoran and Mr. McReynolds, we have no further comments or answers to questions. I want to thank you for coming and making your presentation, and look forward to more community process.
Same here. Thank you very much.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
So we're on to item number 5, and that's our COVID-19 update. I'll just say that the health department continues to publish daily updates on the town website, and there's information on COVID-19 symptoms, testing sites, and resources for those who need assistance with housing, food expenses, and other social assistance programs. The Affordable Housing Trust voted to use some of our federal home funds to start a rent assistance program, and our assistant planner has been diligently working on that, and it should be up and running by August 1st. So hopefully people won't need it, but it will be there if they do. And we also have a micro enterprise grant related to COVID for businesses that are 5 or less employees, and the owner has a 80% area median income or below. So that's not set up yet, but we're hoping to get that grant. Mr. Dennehy or any board members, do you have any updates, COVID-19 related updates? Yes, Mr. Dennehy?
Very briefly, Madam Chair. Yeah, so Town Hall has been put back onto full capacity for work staff. We're anxiously awaiting the governor's information. We were on a call with the Lieutenant Governor today. They're going to make an announcement about phase 3 tomorrow or Friday at the latest. So working safely towards possibly opening some town buildings. I know the library is talking about opening up on Monday. Working through the health department to make sure that we're following all of the CDC best practices and social distancing. Again, to reiterate, equipment has been put in place to take those steps and measures, but looking forward to direction from our state government with respect to phase 3.
Thank you very much. So now number 6 is an update on the Ice House proposed 40B project. That's simply an announcement that on June 19th, the comprehensive application was filed, and so it's now in the Zoning Board of Appeals hands, and we'll update you as we have any new information. Does anyone have any comments or questions relating to that on the board? Mr. Zulus?
I was just going to just comment very briefly that filing that was made included a lot of the negotiated changes that the developers made at the Ice House. It was a very, I think, a very good process. They decreased the number of units. They included the commercial space that was very important to the neighborhood, and they changed the whole design of the building, or the focus of the building, in response to the neighborhood's concerns. So I think we could say that at least so far with that developer's been very responsive to the neighborhood's concerns, and they're going forward with that revised plan that took account for a lot of the things that were raised by the neighborhood and by the board. So hopefully that will continue on a good in a good way.
Thank you. And Mr. Dennehy, I believe that I saw that the link to the application is up. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. All the documentation that we've received is up to date.
Right.
People can go to the select boards page and click on 40B, and each project is identified specifically.
Oh, okay. And so that connects to the planning boards, because I was looking at the planning board. I mean, not the plan, the ZBA, I thought. So it's on there. Okay, thank you. No, people know where to get that. Moving on to number 7. We actually, this is about an open meeting law complaint. And we thought it would be useful to share the Attorney General's office, their decision, because there's a lot of law around open meeting, and we just wanted to let people know that the board has the discretion to move agenda items around on its agenda within the 48-hour period before a meeting, and also to do so during a meeting, which does happen on occasion. And I think most of us have experienced that. So that was something to that we just wanted people to understand. And I think we try not to do that, but sometimes things come up and we need to. And the other thing that the Attorney General's office noted was that there's no requirement to have public comment, and the board just would like to reiterate its commitment to public comment, and that even though it's at the discretion of the board, it is important to us. So does anyone from the board have anything else to add or a question? No? Okay, thank you. Let's see, number 8. So we are on to discussion and approval of the Equity and Justice for All Advisory Committee. And I believe a little later in the day, but in time for our meeting, people may have received a red line copy and a clean copy of a change from Mr. Zulus, and I'm going to turn this over to him to walk us through as we look at this, and then also discuss how we would move forward with staffing the board, the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only substantive change was in response to the discussion last week of the desire to include specifically a reference to immigrants who may be immigrants of color who may be suffering oppression, racism, injustice, and violence. And so we put in that reference. And then the only other change was really more of a clarification, moving a clause that seemed like it made it a little more clear. And so those are the only changes from last week.
Do any of the board members have a question or a comment on the proposed change? Yes, Ms. Conlon.
I think the changes are fine. I have no further comments on the proposal for the charge. Well, I guess it's not really, it's a proposal, it's not really a charge, but it's a description of the committee. I have no comments.
And don't see, I should have participants up again. Okay, no. Very good. So I will entertain, we are intending to vote on this evening, yes? I will entertain a vote then. I'm in a motion.
I'll make a motion to establish an advisory committee on equity and justice for all, whose charge would be 1, to review town policies, procedures, and budgets for the purpose of advancing equity and justice for all, with a focus on eradicating from the town of Milton oppression, racism, injustice, and violence against people of color, including without limitation immigrants of color. 2, to report to the select board on the results of its work at least once each calendar quarter. And 3, to make recommendations based on the results of such work for the consideration of the select board within 18 months from the date of appointment of a chair of the committee. And the proposed membership of the committee would be up to 11 members to be appointed by the select board, including 1 of whom shall be a member of Courageous Conversations Towards Racial Justice, 1 of whom shall be a member of the Milton Interfaith Clergy Association, and 1 of whom shall be a member of Citizens for Diverse Milton.
Pleased to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor? Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Wells? Oh, you were unmuted for a moment.
Sorry, Madam Chair, we're both pressing the button. Mr. Wells, it's all you.
Am I muted or not muted?
We can hear you.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins? Yes. Excellent. And I believe that you have a path forward for staffing to present.
So I thank you, Madam Chair. I think we talked last week about having Mr. Dennehy serve as a clearinghouse for members who we think each of the board members should be on the committee, and there may be duplication, and so I think that's the kind of the route that may make sense. So each of the members will have suggestions, I imagine, and so I think if Mr. Dennehy could be a clearinghouse for that, that may work well.
Very good. We also would then perhaps want a couple of members to go through the list and speak with people, see if they would be willing to serve, and I think that's my understanding of how we would proceed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to help with that. Certainly happy to help with that.
That's wonderful.
And the reason, just to, I'm sorry to interrupt, just the reason for doing it is just for the public, is the open meeting law. And that we can't have any discussion about anything of substance with more than 2 of our members. And so if there were 3 of us who were talking about potential membership, that would be an open meeting law issue. So that's why using Mr. Dennehy as a clearinghouse and perhaps getting some assistance for him might be the best way to go before we tee it up for one of our meetings.
Right. Well, and if there's another member of the board who would also like to help with that, I think if you let Mr. Dennehy know, or would you like to discuss that now? Mr. Wells, did you? Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy if it's you, but if not, just given my background in this area, I'll be glad to do it if you decide not to.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Anyone else have anything to say? No. Okay. Well then, this is momentous, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Zulus, for all of your work and the work of that I went on behind the scenes. So, let's see. So now we move on to discussion and approval of select board committee assignments. I'll apologize ahead of time. I meant to send around a little poll for people so that they could do some thinking about this, and too many phone calls and meetings. But if we might, I would like to turn this over to Mr. Doyle for a moment, because as everyone may know, he has been serving on the Conservation Commission for some time, and he has some things to tell us about that. Mr. Doyle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that I did after deciding to be a candidate for the Select Board was to take a leave of absence from the Conservation Commission, and following election wanted to be sure about the appropriateness or to seek a determination as to whether or not that position could be continued or had to be vacated. There were conversations with John Kiernan, with our chair, who advised that I contact legal counsel. And this week, early this week, legal counsel got back with a determination citing state law and citing a discussion with the Ethics Commission, indicating that I could continue through to the conclusion of the current term on the Conservation Commission, while also sitting as a member of the Select Board. And I'd be more than happy to honor that obligation.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to share in relation to that? Okay, I'll just say thank you very much. Looking at what they have in front of them, you'll be a continuing asset, and we appreciate it very much. So I think we'll just take these in order. There are a couple on here that actually we don't need, so when we get to them, we'll just skip over them. But so the Finance Committee, myself and Ms. Conlon have been on that, and I know, Mr. Zulus, you had said at the last meeting that you were interested. Is there anyone else who is interested on serving on the Finance Committee in the coming year? Well, I am. So
Madam Chair.
I would like to stay on. Oh, yes. Oh, Mr. Wells raised his hand. I see that. Thank you. Mr. Wells? You're muted if you're speaking.
No, ma'am, I did not hit it, but I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes, Ms. Conlon.
So after the last meeting, Mike Zulus and I spoke about the Finance Committee, and I'm willing to step off that since I know that Mike is interested in joining it. What we talked about was the fact that we had been trying to spend probably the summer months working on the financial policies and the budget calendar and trying to get some of that finished up, which we had started a long time ago and put off for the operating budget, and then the same thing happened last year. So most of that committee's efforts have been on the operating budget, but we had recently taken back up the financial policies. So the discussion that Mike and I had offline was that perhaps it might make sense to see whether the board would be open to making a switch in the fall for that, so that if Melinda and I stay on the Finance Committee for the summer months, we could try to get the financial policies farther along down the line, and by the time we get into budget season, that might be an appropriate time to make the change, if that's agreeable to everybody, and if Mike is still willing to do that.
Fine with me.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think we got off to another a running start this time with the policies, and as you know, I'm very excited about the budget calendar, so I'd like to get that sewn up, as it were. Is everyone else amenable to to putting that appointment off until September? I don't see any objections, so we'll note that. Great, that's a great solution. Thank you. Now, Housing Committee action. Katie is the Master Plan Implementation Committee representative on that, because that's the way that committee works. So I am actually the representative from the Select Board. Would anybody like to step onto the Housing Committee?
I think you're doing a fine job, Madam Chair. This is becoming a bailiwick.
Okay. I'm assuming that the Affordable Housing Trust will be the same.
For me, it is anyway.
Now, the Milton Landing Committee, we talked about that. That's a very short-term type of assignment, and I believe. Do I have that correct? I think we talked.
I would say we're another year, Madam Chair.
Okay.
That's what I would think. By the time we have it all wrapped up and done.
Okay.
To be on the safe side. Hopefully, it'll be faster, but
right.
I would say given the year.
Okay. So given that, it seems to me as if it makes sense, but I don't know. Richard and Katie, if you want to tell us if you would like to step off, or if it makes more sense because you only have a year or so of work left for you to stay on. Maybe you could weigh in on that.
I'm okay with staying on it unless someone really wants to
I am
join
as well.
it.
I think we should both stay on, especially Katie sits on MPIC. Even though she doesn't sit on this as MPIC, she brings that historical background with her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you. So traffic mitigation, I think we've established that can't change.
Well, Madam Chair, if I may, I think the committee, the work of the committee is completed with the issuance and acceptance of the report. The work to be done now is to implement some of those things. And so, while I won't be a member of that committee because I don't think we need to continue with the committee, I'm going to take it as one of my chores over the next year to try to get those recommendations implemented.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. Solid Waste Advisory Committee, we have a 3-year contract, so that will not change. Trustees of the Affordable Housing Trust, is there anyone who would like to join the trustees? Mr. Doyle?
Madam Chair, I recognize the new responsibilities that you have in your role as chair. And I just want to say to you and the other members of the board that recognizing that you have a longer history and you know where needs might rest, please feel free to position me on any one of these committees where you think I can serve the board well.
Well, that's very kind of you, but I think everyone on the board would also say that we want you to follow your interests as well, because you'll be an asset wherever you go. The Affordable Housing Trust, now it could be very interesting for you. I will say, as chair of the Housing Committee, I have to go to every one of those meetings anyway. So you're always welcome to come, and if you would like a deep dive into affordable housing, I'm available anytime for that. And there are many more people in town who are much more knowledgeable as well. So, but that being said, if no one has a burning desire, I'll stay on the trustees. But so we do have Master Plan Implementation Committee, and I know Ms. Conlon has said that, pointed out that the Milton Village zoning that had a very wonderful webinar made the other night, and I'm not saying that because I made a statement, but the webinar itself was just terrific. That's completed as far as its development. And it might be a good time for someone to step onto the Master Plan Implementation Committee if they would like. But I don't think that means that you wouldn't continue to serve, Ms. Conlon. Do I have that correct?
I'm happy to stay on it, but if someone would like to be on it, I have served for 4 years on that committee. So right now, yeah, we presumably after town meeting on July 28th, we will, hopefully we'll get a good vote on the Milton Village zoning, and then that portion will be behind us. What we're working on now is the town civic center area. We had a call this morning on that, that I was going to report on under future agenda items or members' reports as to when our next meeting is, and see whether the board might want to post, not a joint meeting, but post just in case our members would like to attend that. But that's the project we're currently working on. And I expect that will probably go for another couple of months, and then we'll be onto something new. We've already talked about some things that we might want to work on, but we're still focusing on what our priorities and goals would be as a committee for the new fiscal year. So if someone would like to serve on that, or at least probably sometime this summer would be the right time to make a change there. But I'm happy to stay on it if no one has got a burning desire to be on the implementation committee.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Doyle?
That's something that has interested me from the start. So if you would like, Katie, I'd be happy to follow in your shoes as best as possible.
Okay, Arthur. Now, let me point out that might also put you on the housing committees, which is kind of a backdoor way in for the Affordable Housing Trust that you just volunteered for with Melinda. But sure, if you're interested in doing it, I'd be happy to step off it and turn the reins over to you. Would it make sense to? I think that one might also make sense to do late summer, just so we can try to wrap up with MAPC the work we're doing right now on the Town Civic Center.
Right. And I would like the two of you just to have a conversation offline about the time commitment for that, only because, Arthur, I realize that the Conservation Commission can be time consuming. If my recollection of my 5 years on that,
okay.
And I'm sure that you can handle it, but I would just like Katie to let you know what their schedule is like, and but if you could do that, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, and I think the Conservation Commission work is going to become increasingly intense.
Oh, okay.
So.
Thank you.
But that doesn't. I'm not saying that to shortchange the earlier interest in doing this.
Thank you. So pilot, we had talked about, I think that we wanted to have a follow-up. Oh, Mr. Zulus?
No.
Okay. That we wanted to have a follow-up conversation with the pilot committee because at the moment in the COVID landscape that we have, as Mr. Doyle pointed out, we may want to hold the committee in abeyance for the moment. Does anyone have anything to say about that? Yes, Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, I will say that, I think the pilot committee, which is responsible for helping to enforce the pilot policy, has had some upward movement and some positive results over the last 4 years, has some momentum. So I think it might be a mistake to put it in mothballs. I think the pilot committee certainly, and this board, can take consideration of the effects of COVID. But I think in terms of, establishing communication with the nonprofits and continuing to try to enforce the policy, and I thought about this a little bit after the conversation last week, in my view, it would be a mistake to put it in mothballs for now. I think certainly the committee can take account for what's going on around us, and this board can as well. But I think it's important to keep it going. That's my view of it.
Any other members? Oh, Mr. Wells?
So thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for Mr. Dennehy. We've not received anything yet for FY21 from any of the nonprofits, have we?
Oh, Mr. Dennehy, you're.
I checked the mail today and didn't see anything. Normally, Curry College sends it on the first day of the fiscal year. I did not see anything today.
Thank you. So just to follow up, first to Mr. Doyle's comments last week, which I thought was in my mind, but secondly to Mr. Zulus' comments, I don't know if I'd want to I agree with him. I don't know if I'd want to mothball the committee. They've worked really hard, as you know, Michael. I mean, it's just to get to where we are today was an enormous amount of work. And I think if we just mothball it, I'm more inclined to keep the committee intact, and perhaps there's a lot to be learned from communication, dialogue. I think even just continuing the dialogue, listening may teach us a lot of, at this point. And we may wind up having to take a compassionate act, as we've done right away when COVID started with some other entities that we control. Yeah, I agree with Mike Zulus not to just mothball the committee. That just probably doesn't set a good precedent. And what does it say to all the work that they've done so far? This issue is going to come back. I think we could all agree it's not going to go away. COVID has changed the climate and changed the environment we're working in, but I don't see it going away. So I really think, Madam Chair, it might be incumbent upon you to maybe call a meeting, have a meeting of the pilot committee and sit and talk with them and hear their thoughts as well, just then versus us talking about it now for a second time and them, hearing it secondhand. Just we're only as good as our volunteers, as it's the same with the citizens who live here. So just my thought on that.
Thank you. Yes, and I did not mean to necessarily. I don't think that's what Mr. Doyle was talking about, mothballing. But and I was suggesting that we meet with them, more a subset of us meet with them and talk about, as Mr. Zulus said, what this time means for their work and what that work would look like in this context. And so that's more what I meant. So thank you for helping that clarify.
Madam Chair,
yes.
Do you think we should put them on the agenda and bring them in and have an open discussion with them about this? I don't know what everyone thinks.
Right. Ms. Coleman?
Well, I think I don't think Arthur was talking about a permanent mothballing, but I think Arthur's suggestion was just kind of a temporary abeyance or holding off on it because of the COVID situation, if I understood, and Arthur can speak for himself, but if I understood it correctly, that in agreeing with it, that's what I was thinking. And prior to that issue coming up at the last meeting, I did suggest to the chair a little while ago that if no one else is interested in replacing Tony in that committee, I might be interested in replacing Tony on the committee. I think we should probably make an appointment to the committee before we just bring them in, because it probably makes sense. I don't think they've met Mr. Denny, he might know, but I don't think they've had a meeting recently anyway, probably in recent months. So I think it would be a good idea for that committee to meet and maybe talk about the issues and what the approach might be, and then come in and talk with us.
Right. That would be my preferred course of action, would be to make an appointment to the committee and then have the committee meet, and then we can talk about coming in. Does that meet with people's? Katie, thank you for stepping forward. Is there anyone else that would like to step on to pilot? No? Okay. All right. Thank you. So next is Capital Improvement Planning Committee. I think, Richard, you asked if you said you would like to stay on.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to stay on Capital.
Is there anyone else who was interested in also serving on?
I have a recusal issue on that, so I served on it many years ago, but it's really become a committee that does a lot of work on bonding issues, and which is not how it always used to be. A committee that focused on a few dollars of free cash, and then over time it sort of morphed into doing a lot of bonding projects. So I'm not eligible to serve on that committee because of the recusal issue.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, and I have to admit, Youth Task Force, I can't remember what we said about, I know Mr. Zulus and Mr. Wells were involved as the church project was going forward, but I'm not sure what's happening with the task force at this point.
So, the task force, Madam Chair, the task force was in the process of deciding its next course, whether that included a broader project along the lines of the study that was commissioned of the different properties, or something else. So the committee, that's where the committee stood. I think there is work to be done by the youth task force, and the chair of the committee changed just recently. So that was before COVID. So I think that task force is going to continue and should. They just need to. It just needs to, shake off the COVID cobwebs and get back in action.
Okay. So that being said, Mr. Zulus and Mr. Wells, is it your intention to continue, or for other members? Or is there anyone interested, I guess I should ask.
Yeah, I'll say I'm not wedded to it. If someone else is interested, I'm happy to, happy to step aside. But if there's no one else with a burning desire, I'm happy to stay on it as well.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I think one member is enough for where they're at right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good. Let's see, school building committee. Well, that was an indefinite term, and Mr. Zulus, you were appointed to that. So
that's a little scary. Indefinite
well,
term.
I know but it's a little bit different committee. It's
no,
not,
I know.
yeah. So yes. And that was my understanding, that he would be appointed, unless of course he needed to step down for some reason. Which was that everyone else's understanding?
I'm fine with it. Well, I mean, if you're fine with it, Michael, I'm fine. If you want to, should we make it? Do you want a term, Mr. Zulus? Do you want us to give it a term?
Probably a good idea. Probably a good idea. I mean, people may want to go in a different direction. So I don't want to be standing on my definite term saying you can't take me off that committee. I'm here indefinitely. So it's probably a good idea to put a term on it.
So if there is no one at this point who would like to step onto the school building committee, shall we make this a 1-month term for you then, at which point you might not decide to run for office?
You mean 1-year term, Madam Chair?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's normal.
Very good. So now we have the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. At this point, we don't have members. There's a note here that says we don't have members appointed, and I know that there has been debate in the past about the appropriateness of having a board member on there. So, Ms. Conlon?
We don't have a member appointed. Mike Zulus and I used to be members of the committee for a little while. There have been board members on and off it over the last few years, and the consensus was that it probably made sense not to have anybody on it, make it a purely advisory committee to us. But I have been serving a little bit as the liaison with that committee. So, I mean, I'm happy to continue in that role unless someone else would like to, although I think it's good if there is some, there's a lot of history and there's a lot of issues relating to the airplanes, and I think it's good to have some history with the issue to work with them. But I'm happy to serve on it unless someone else would like to. And not on it, but as a liaison with them, or kind of keep the communication going with the chair and the members of the committee.
Does anyone have any comments? Thank you. I would appreciate that. Fire Station Building Committee. Mr. Wells.
I'll be happy to stay. I'll be happy to stay there, Madam Chair.
Okay. I feel bound to ask, anybody have a burning desire or no? Okay, thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. And the last one is the policy committee, and of course, Mr. Farrington is no longer here, and Mr. Zulus is on the committee. This is a really important committee, and I know it can be difficult to get that work done because there are always things pressing. But this is a very important committee.
It was largely moribund this year and needs energy and rejuvenation. And I think we had a lot of action the year before. We rolled out a lot of policies, but then in the last year we just didn't move forward. So we just need to restart.
Yes. So is who would like to re-energize our policy efforts? All right. Well, if no one else wants to, I would do my best to be useful on the committee.
Well, the only thing, Melinda, is the chair of the board and staying on the finance committee and the housing committee. I think you're going to have a pretty full plate, and the Affordable Housing Trust. I don't know how often the policy committee needs to meet, but I don't get the sense that it's very frequent. I'm happy to serve on it. Arthur already raised the point about the time commitment for being the chair of the board, and I guess I would just want to reiterate that.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than you feeling like you have to take something on, if no one steps forward, I'm happy to volunteer for it, since I am coming off some other committees.
Okay, well, I would appreciate that, not just for the reason you mentioned, but for the acumen you will bring. If really that's all I have to do is step up, and then somebody will jump in and no. So, Mr. Zulus, is it your intention to stay on the policy committee, or?
I'm happy to. We didn't have a good track record this year. We did okay. We did okay the year before, but if the board will indulge me with one more chance, I'll certainly take it.
I think you have to look at your productivity of the past year as a whole, and not that little pinprick. Looking through that, you have to look through the whole lens. So, so I think we have assignments set, and we could just approve these as one slate, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Sure.
I'll make a motion.
We could, but Madam Chair, you asked me to talk with Arthur about the MPIC offline, so we probably should have that conversation before we at least appoint that one.
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, so let's just let's pull that one out. And
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the others, if that's okay.
that's great. And I'm sorry to add a little complication there. I just wanted to make sure that Arthur knows, the time commitment and really feels that he made an informed choice. So is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Clarification, if I may?
Yes.
Madam Chair, following the conversation that Katie and I have, and assuming I'm moving to the Master Plan Implementation Committee, that also puts me with you and the trustees of affordable housing, if I understood correctly.
Well,
so I didn't know if that request of Katie affected that as well.
Right. So that's not necessarily true, is it, Katie? Because the Master Plan Implementation Committee needs to appoint someone from their committee to be on the Housing Committee.
They would, yes, and all of the members are on some committee or another. Like although, you know, some of them were traffic mitigation, which with Mike, Dick Burke was our representative on that, and that has now ended for him. So although he's involved with the East Milton Steering Committee and others, so that committee would have to have a conversation about who they would appoint, but it's possible, like Arthur, that you would be asked to do that.
I might say almost it's probable that you would be asked to do that. And we try to meet twice a month. We could also, we could chat offline about that as well.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins, yes. Okay, excellent. Item 10 is a discussion approval of senior tax work-off program. So the background on this is that Christine Stanton, our COA director, would like, she's advocating for the senior tax work-off credit to be gifted, the remainder to be gifted to the volunteers due to the Safer at Home order for those in this high-risk age group. And also because the town offices are closed to the public currently. And even if they were opened, that would add another group of people to ostensibly to staff. So it's noted that Westwood has granted this, and Norwood is also advocating for it as well. There's a list of 21 volunteers, and we checked with Kevin Freitag before the meeting, and there does not seem to be a legal difficulty with doing this. I would say that the information we don't have is any dollar amount, if board members were curious about that. Mr. Dennehy, do you have anything to add?
No, very well said, Madam Chair. Thank you. Again, Christine Stanton brought this to us. Thankfully, this board, along with the Board of Assessors, increased that dollar amount 2 years ago. We saw an increased subscription and brilliant participation from our seniors in this work-off program. They were located in several town buildings throughout town. I can honestly say I don't think any one of them skipped a shift, whether it was snowing out or you know, the heat and humidity of the summertime. And I've said to this board before, the immeasurable compliments I received from people being greeted by a pleasant and wonderful person at the gateway of our beautiful town hall. So I would advocate for this. There is precedent with Westwood and Norwood. Westwood has done it, and Norwood is advocating for it. I could get a dollar amount to this board if they want, and you could take a vote contingent upon that. But yeah, I would be a staunch advocate for this. Many have called Town Hall wondering when we're reopening so they can get back to work and work this program off. So again, safer at home, social distancing, very vulnerable part of our population. And I think in line with what this board has done with some of our tenants in town, Milton Arts Center, Yacht Club, Kidder Library, to that extent, trying to ease some of the financial burden in these troubling times. I think this would go a long way.
Madam Chair, I'll make a
I
motion.
have a question.
If you accept it.
Oh, one moment, Mr. Wells. Yes, Ms. Conlon?
We have a list of the names. I don't think we need to read them all. I think the motion could just be to grant. I was actually going to make the motion too, but Richard started to make it. I think we just reference the 21 seniors without their names and street addresses. And I agree. I'm comfortable with doing it. I think I don't know whether they start in January, Mike. Is that when they start usually?
Correct. It's a calendar year program, and some of them have actually almost completed their hours of service through COVID-19. So exceptional work done by them. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say. So if they started in January, some of them have probably already gotten pretty close to reaching their limit before COVID struck. So, I mean, Rich, if you want to
Yeah.
make the motion, I'll be happy to second
Yes,
it, but I
ma-
think we
yeah.
should omit the names and addresses.
I agree. I was going to ask if we could waive reading the names to you, Joe. So, Madam Chair, I just make a motion to grant the senior tax work-off credit to the numerous volunteers listed of the town of Milton.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins, yes. And I'd like to thank all of them. My mother was part of that program, and it's a really valuable program, not just for the people who volunteer, but all the departments and residents too. So thank you. And thank you to Christine Stanton for bringing this to our attention. So item number 11, this is the First Amendment to the Airspace License Agreement, and I have to say thank you to Ms. Conlon again for making sure that we kept up on this. And does anyone have any comments or questions? No? Yes, Ms. Conlon?
Oh, good. Mr. Den, he was ahead of me. If he had information, I'm happy to defer.
No, go ahead, Vice Chair Conlon. I'm just going to note that Chase Berkeley is on the line. If we need his input, he's been working closely with Town Engineer John Thompson and folks at MassDOT and Attorney Kevin Freitag. Unfortunately, who couldn't be here, he has a wonderful birthday party for his daughter this evening. But I think most of the questions have been answered. But Chase is here to supplement it if need be.
I was just going to say, and mainly for Arthur's benefit, since this has been going on for quite a while, I think the changes that have been suggested on page 4 for the use, it's called the permitted uses, it probably serves our purposes. It's not the exact language that we had requested, but it would require, if the town ever, whether it's a long time from now or maybe never, but at some point, if we would ever want to reopen Adams Street over the deck, we would just have to consult with Mass DOT and meet their engineering standards for their projects. So I think it gets us to where we need to be. We had some back and forth with them over the word consent, and we wanted it to be an approval as of right, so that the town would have the authority to open the road and not need to seek the consent of the state or the federal governments, knowing that 30 years from now, we could be dealing with people who have no recollection at all of what the deck project entailed and what the intent of anyone was. So I think this probably gets us to where something that we can live with, and does give us enough flexibility. So that's my sense of it.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else from the board have a question or a comment? Mr. Zulus?
Yeah, I'll just say, just as a recap, I mean, this is a 99-year lease. DOT owns that land over the highway. We're getting a 99-year lease, and it'll be used in connection with the reconstruction of the deck. But because of Katie's dogged work, we will have the option in our own discretion. The town will have the option in its own discretion, with only the obligation to consult with DOT and to meet road engineering standards to reopen it if someday we want to. So I think it's a good result, and largely because of Ms. Conlon and Kevin Freitag, and also John Flynn.
And John Flynn.
And John Flynn at Murphy Hesse. So a good result.
Thank you.
Fair result.
Thank you. And Mr. Berkeley, since you were kind enough to join us, is there anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not really. MassDOT's last real sticking point was really related to structural issues and opening the bridge to vehicular traffic and ensuring its structural integrity before that's done. So that's really what it came down to. It was more of an engineering issue than a legal or a right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think we all share their concern there. So thank you very much. So I'll entertain a motion.
Oh. I'll move to approve and sign the First Amendment to the airspace license agreement between the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and the town of Milton.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Zoll?
Yes.
Ms. Collins, yes. Excellent. See. Now, number 12. This is the agreement for the cost overruns with Mass DOT. We had begun speaking about this last week, but we did request some numbers, and did everyone have a chance to look at what a 10% overage would look like? So on a $6,849,943 project, you move the decimal point over, and you've got $684,994.30 if there's, so they'll kick that in, and then it starts to tick. So Mr. Berkeley, since you're here, maybe you can give us a little idea about, this is a typical contract and agreement, but perhaps you could give us a little more background.
Me, Madam Chair, Mike Dennehy?
Actually, yeah,
Good, sure.
Mr. Berkeley.
Okay, yeah, and I will defer to Chase as well. He's been working with this group. This is a very good story. We heard this evening from the 40B proposers and developers and neighborhood about East Milton and traffic. This is the project, for those that don't know, that is going to update and reconstruct East Milton Square. It's been, I couldn't tell you when the earmarks came in from Congressman Capuano. It was before I got here, but this is the culmination of that. Chase can talk to a pre-construction meeting that took place yesterday with MassDOT and the contractor who was awarded the contract. This is again, this is a template that they use, and MassDOT is leading the charge with McKay, who is the construction group, who actually may want to come in and introduce himself to this board next week. Time is of the essence, and I know Mr. Berkeley can probably give us an update as to when things are going to start to look different in the square. And unfortunately, there's so much going on in the square. Adams Street is set to be hopefully repaved tomorrow, and if not, Friday. And we apologize to everyone for that inconvenience. And then the next step in this process is the East Milton Deck reconstruction project, which is very complex, but it is at the point where the town is under the leadership of MassDOT and their contractor ready to get going. So Chase, is anything you want to add about this? I know you've been actively discussing this with town council and with our wonderful partners at MassDOT.
Yeah, so in terms of the agreement, so last week when we discussed this, we just did not have Exhibit A at the time. So MassDOT provided that, and that gives us two certainties. One is that the actual bid price is used for the calculation and not the estimate, which is a big difference, almost $2 million. And it also lets us know what that 10% amount will be. You know, these agreements are put in place so the scopes of these projects don't swell after the bids are awarded. You know, as you can imagine, small communities tend to try to tack on as much work as possible when these projects roll in. So it's really a way to control the scope from expanding beyond a reasonable point after projects are awarded. So I think we're covered as far as the project, the way it was designed and bid. And yeah, so just an update on the paving for Adams Street since we mentioned it. So that'll be Monday. Just because of weather-related issues, we had to slide that schedule a little back. But certainly by early next week, we'll have Adams Street paved, and appreciate all the residents and businesses down there that have tolerated the numerous seasons of construction.
And so you had the pre-construction meeting today. There's not a timeline or a schedule yet, though?
That's correct. So yeah, the pre-construction meeting was held. It was essentially just a reading of most of the contract documents. More to come on that. There is a very large community outreach item associated with this project, almost $300,000 worth of community outreach that has been planned. So you should expect a very open dialogue throughout the course of the project and the resources to support that, including websites and project updates of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you. Yes, I think that's what Mr. Dennehy was referring to, that the McKay may come in next week and start the ball rolling on that and let people know how they can access information, but also give feedback. And so thank you. Very good. I'll entertain him. Oh, Mr. Zulus?
Just one question, and I think I asked this last week, but just to confirm, Chase or Mike, I just want to confirm that the 6.5 million is going to buy everything that Howard Stein Hudson sold to us along the way here, and that we're not going to have to pay anything above that in order to get what they sold to us over the last year and a half or so.
Yes, and Chase can point out that in the economy that was before COVID, right? And I don't think we've seen the effects of COVID yet economically, but this bid was advertised pre-COVID. Chase, what was Howard Stein Hudson estimate? A couple of million south of this number?
The estimate was right around 4.2 million. Bids came in at 6.8. So that, advantageous climate to contractors was certainly prevalent when this was bid. But to answer your question, it does include all of the identified in the 100% plans.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Wells.
just to follow up to Mr. Zulus' concern, I'm watching this like a hawk. That was my greater concern is when the bid came in, they weren't going to fully fund us, and that's where, to your question, Michael, we would have had to see not everything that was advertised. So I'm very comfortable where we're at in the fact that they're fully funding this and that we are getting all the things that Howard Stein Hudson articulated to us and all the things that were fought for, not just this board, but going back to even boards before us when this project started.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair,
I'll make a motion. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If I might, Mr. Wells, Member Wells, that's very important. In my history of working with MassDOT or Federal Highway for that matter in Boston and now in Milton, it's not incumbent upon MassDOT to pick up such a sizable increase in a bid. And I think Milton should be very thankful for our partners at MassDOT for picking up the tab. It's 30 to 40% higher than what was estimated. And to former Chair Zulus, Member Zulus's point, we are getting what Howard Stein Hudson said we would get. So I think a huge thank you to the Federal Highway Administration and our federal electeds for the earmarks that we got a long time ago that are still in existence, and to MassDOT, our partners at MassDOT for picking up an exponential increase in a project that's so necessary for our town. So thank you to both of our partners.
Yes, well, thank you. And I really appreciate that being noted and highlighted.
Madam Chair, if it's all right with you, I'll make an approval authorization to sign the agreement number 111291 between Massachusetts Department of Transportation, Highway Division, also known as MassDOT, and the town of Milton relative to cost overruns and future maintenance of the East Milton Square Bridge deck reconstruction, including signals and landscaping.
Second.
Oh, yes, Mr. Denny.
One more point of discussion. Would you want me to be the signatory, or would this board prefer to sign?
Thank you. I forgot about that.
I'll re-amend it. I'll change it to authorize. What's up? Whatever the board wants, I'm fine with that, Madam Chair. I don't know what the rest of the board feels.
Agreement, Mr. Denny. can sign this for us. That we.
So I'll offer it as a friendly amendment to authorize the town administrator to sign.
I'll accept that. So I'll change to authorize the town administrator to approve and sign the First Amendment.
Right. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle? Oh, Mr. Doyle, you are muted.
Sorry about that, Madam Chair. Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yeah, yes.
Ms. Collins? Yes. Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Berkeley.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time and for all the work you've been doing on this.
Madam, okay.
Yes, Mr. Wells.
Do we need to make the second motion here to authorize the town administrator to sign? Is that the same?
No, that's it.
Oh, I already got that. Okay, we got that. Okay,
Yeah.
very good. I
You
got it.
did. You did.
I take that back. It's getting late.
Yes, I know. My apologies for that. So number 13 is the Max Ullin Skating Rink Lease Committee, but I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Dennehy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Very briefly, I took a look at the charge of that committee and the makeup of that committee. I think we're in a different realm. The previous charge included a couple of members from Curry College who were the long-term managers of the rink. So that has to be rewritten. I do have a candidate from Milton Youth Hockey. I do have a candidate from the Parks Commissioners. I would certainly volunteer to be on that board. We are trying to locate a member of the Commonwealth Figure Skating Group, which was also on that committee previously. And then I would ask potentially if a member of this board would be willing to sit on this committee. It would be a fast-moving current, as the senator mentioned at last week's board meeting. We're pretty close to getting a permit from the DCR. It would be a multi-year permit. This would be something that we would appreciate. And so it would basically be to work through that process of accepting the permit and working through the logistics on how the town has the rink managed, knowing that we don't have our wonderful partner, Curry College, with us anymore. So I think we go to a 5-person board from a 7-person board. So we're going to rewrite all that, and I'll bring it back to you next week. But just for the thought for this group, if there's someone who would be willing to participate with Molly Naughton from Milton Youth Hockey and Ted Carroll from the Parks Commissioners and myself and one other individual.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll do that, Madam Chair. If no one else wants to, I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mr. Wells. Okay. Now we are on to the TA's report.
Thank you
Just one,
again.
Madam Chair, just a point. So are we going to appoint these individuals
No.
listed or no?
No,
Okay.
not
We
tonight.
can do all that next week, yeah.
Right, next week.
Okay.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you. I would like to welcome our new fire chief, Chris Madden. He's been with the Milton Fire Department since 2001, been a lieutenant since 2009. I'd like to thank the selection committee, former select board member Barrington, Wellesley, Saugus, and Brockton fire chiefs, as well as Paige Eppolito, who sat in. I would also like to thank Chief Grant one more time. I saw him today in town hall, so he was there as a resident and a citizen, not as a fire chief. But no, honestly, I'd like to welcome Chris and bring him to this group, if not next week, possibly the week after. And then we'll try to formalize a pinning ceremony sometime before July 15th. I'm trying to coordinate with the clerk and Chief Grant and Chief Madden. I'd love to have this board and some of our state electeds with us that evening. So more to come on that. But welcome, Chief Madden.
So Mr. Zulus?
I just want to mention something related to that. Back in March, before at the last in-person meeting we had, we were supposed to have some of the promoted firefighters come before our committee. We weren't able to do it then, but hopefully we can do that, maybe in connection with Chief Madden's pinning or at a separate time. But that was something that we wanted to do, but when COVID hit, we haven't yet done that. So that's something we probably shouldn't lose sight of.
Certainly, and to that point, Member Zulus, Mr. Madden was a lieutenant, so there will be someone promoted to the lieutenant rank simultaneously when we do the pinning. So that's a great point. We were inundated with a 40B that night, and COVID and all sorts of stuff in the world changed. But yeah, that's certainly something we can get back on the radar for this board. I have two other things. The Americans with Disabilities Act turns 30 years old this month. So I think that's worth acknowledging. In 1986, at town meeting, the town formed a Commissions for Disability. It's a very active group. I'm glad that the town has this. I worked in Boston. We had a similar commission. They actually had a department that ran 24/7. But I think it's worth thanking our Commission on Disability, Chair Diane DiTullio Augustino, our Building Commissioner Joe Prondak, Iris Joseph, Catherine Opatham, Nathalie Elfer, Charlene Yu, Earl Fay, Coleman Irwin, and Alex Rosenberg, in addition to everyone else that served on the commission over the years. So happy birthday to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and for the continued support for the Commission on Disability in our town. And lastly, as we welcome Chris Madden to town as the fire chief, we got a sad email today from Captain Fleming, who's run the fire auxiliary for almost 40 years, that he will be stepping down. So I would like to personally thank my third grade guidance counselor at the William Trotter School in Roxbury, where I spent my first 5 years in the Boston Public School System. Captain Fleming, who's been on the Council on Aging Board for years, sent the email today. Actually thanked everyone else, but I want to thank him for his 40 years of service. He and that entire group go above and beyond, and I just want to salute the captain. So thank you, Captain Fleming. That's all I have for tonight.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Will.
Just a follow-up to Mr. Dennehy's final comment there. I think it would be very prudent of us to have a gentleman who's given almost 50 years of his life in volunteer service to the town, that we bring him in at some point when we're back to in-person meetings.
Yes, I agree. It's one of the saddest parts of all of this, because we have so many people to say thank you to and to honor, and we want to do that in person. But yes, I was making a note about that, and we'll make sure that happens.
Thank you.
You've concluded, Mr. Dennehy. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Chair's report. We're going to defer talking about anything that's on there as far as legislation. But I did want to address the 4th of July. It's yet another incredibly momentous day for our country. And I know that I spoke on Memorial Day about one American family in the context of shaping our actions and our intentions and our resolve to create one family by caring for one another and creating a more equitable world. And as we know, recently COVID has shown us in stark relief things that were already visible, but it has made it more so around the inequity that Black and brown people, people of color, you experience every day. And so that's, while the 4th of July has brought a lot of wonderful things and our great country, there are a lot of things that are not great and need us all to work together on. Last year I was lucky enough to attend Courageous Conversations reading of Frederick Douglass's speech that he gave on that day, and they're actually doing a reprisal. You can actually watch it, and you can sign up at their website to attend. It's 7 p.m. tomorrow. And one thing I would say is I wish everyone a very safe 4th of July, and just to be careful and remember that COVID is still here. And I just heard about a friend's cousin who's just killed by a drunk driver. So I also remind people about that. I don't mean to put a big damper on things, but we care about you, and we want everyone to keep the holiday and think very deeply about what it truly means, and to stay safe. My report is concluded. Do any members have reports, Ms. Conlon?
Just briefly, Madam Chair, I just wanted to let the board know that this morning, Cheryl Tugayas, who's the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and I, and Dan Clark for the Fire Station Building Committee, had a call with Joshua Fiala of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Josh is the person who had worked on the Milton Village zoning, but he's also working now on the Milton Civic Center design, and that implicates the headquarters station for the fire project. So Dan has been at some of our meetings to represent the Fire Station Building Committee. We've scheduled a meeting for July 14th of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and the plan for that session is for Josh to present some redesigned drawings, probably 2 rather than 3, which he did at the February or March meeting, and show some revised changes that are proposed for the area right around the town hall and the fire headquarters. The redesigned plan would be in response to some comments made by some of the neighbors and abutters who were at our meeting in March. There has not been any activity since that time because of COVID. We've not had too many meetings. So we're picking that back up, and the idea would be to try to finalize that in fairly short order, but have a session on July 14th, and then have Josh follow up on any remaining comments and suggestions that might be made at that time, and hopefully be in a position to move that design forward. I know the Fire Station Building Committee would like to have some kind of final plans for the landscaping and the parking lot and the area around the Fire Station Building Committee by, I think Dan said September, so that we could have them be in a position where they can move forward with their final drawings for the headquarters building. And a lot of what our committee is looking at relates to the broader area around the fire station. So we might want to consider posting a notice of a meeting for our board on the 14th of July in case some of the members would like to take part in that webinar and attend it and ask any questions or make any comments.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, Hillary, we should definitely post for that, so we can work on the language that's needed. Thank you, that's excellent news. And Mr. Doyle, do you have a report?
No additional comments at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Wells?
No comments tonight, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Zulus?
Madam Chair, I was unceremoniously dumped as a panelist, so I missed what I'm sure was it was a mistake. Hillary hit the wrong button. So I'm afraid I missed what I'm sure was a very eloquent statement about the 4th of July. So all I'll say is happy 4th of July without repeating what you said. I'm sure it was very, I'll catch it on the replay. And then you may have mentioned this, but I'll just say it as well. Please wear your masks in connection, as we open up restaurants and commerce in East Milton Square and down Milton Village. It is more important than ever to make sure we wear our masks, because any good news that we've had over the last month could be lost very quickly if people lose the commitment to wearing their masks, particularly as things open up. So please wear your mask so we can continue in the right direction on coronavirus.
Yes.
Sorry if I repeated what you said.
No, I didn't allude directly to masks. I did remind people that there's COVID and this is a holiday weekend, so people would be, yes. So no, always good to actually use the word. So very good. Let's see. Next is meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve that. And
Oh, wait a
if
minute.
there's any to removed. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go
Public,
ahead.
you want to do public comment? You want to do public comment response first?
That's all right. We can do it. We can do it in a different order. My apologies, Richard. So
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from May 27th, June 15th, June 23rd, and June 30th.
as amended.
As amended, I'm sorry, as amended.
Quite all right. Oh,
It looks like Arthur has his hand up ahead of me.
yes. But if you could second and then we'll discuss that. Okay, Mr. Doyle.
Just to note that I would have to abstain from May 27.
Yes, that I had, I know, I saw that Mr. Farrington's name is on there because you were not here yet. So yes. Do I have a second?
I'll second for discussion. I've got a couple of minor changes on the minutes.
Okay.
Just on June 15th, I think we should just make a note that the reference to the 1/12 budget for July that we voted, that was a contingency in case town meeting didn't pass the budget that night. So for anyone down the road reading those minutes, there might be some confusion about whether we actually did a 1/12 budget. I think we should just add in that it was voted as a contingency in case town meeting did not approve the budget as proposed.
Yes. Okay.
And then there's just an extra word in the June 23rd minutes in section 2A in the first line. We should just need to delete the word voted. It's moved instead of voted, but moved is there. It's just a stray word. And then on the June 30th minutes, there's just an error that talks about amendments, a friendly amendment to an affidavit, but it's amendments and affidavits. So we should just clarify we wanted both from these school bus companies. But those are very minor points.
Okay.
As amended, Madam Chair.
Good. All those in favor, Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Doyle?
Noting the abstention, yes.
And Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins? Yes. Okay. Yes. So my apologies. We're now on public comment response. Oh, no.
I guess, Madam Chair, I'm a little bit concerned about a reference that was made to misdemeanors or felonies in connection with school employees. And I think we have to be very careful to say that, well, people can have whatever opinions they might like, and there are free speech protections. It's important that we have the facts too. And I think that was not, I think people need to have the facts before they make allegations about employees and charges of misdemeanors or anything along those lines. So I would just respond to note that it's a school committee matter and it's not really an issue for our jurisdiction, but I thought that those particular comments about employees at the school department were not appropriate.
I concur with Ms. Conlon, Madam Chair.
Yes.
And I'll just say the draft policy that we have on public comment that's not been approved talks about having public comment focusing on those things that are within the jurisdiction of this board. And so we have to get the policy moving along, and get it finally approved. But that's something that we can all discuss in the context of that.
Yes, well, that was weighing on my mind as I was listening, because it's not under our jurisdiction. And we don't have a policy necessarily passed yet that says we're not going to entertain public comments on another board's purview. But I think, but yes, and I concur with Ms. Conlon's thoughts as well. Does anyone else have any response? Thank you. Very good. So future meeting dates. So we are scheduled to meet on July 8th and July 22nd, which will be the last meeting, really technically before the special town meeting. So we also have July 28th, we'll be meeting at 6:30 before the town meeting. And then if need be, at 7 p.m. on July 30th. It would be very exciting if we only needed one night, but we will do what people need. Okay, so future agenda items. The agendas, I think we did so much work, and we were meeting so many times each week, and of course things have come up that we've had to handle as one-offs. So I think the agenda for next week may be somewhat light. Do any members have agenda items that they'd like to bring forward now, or they would like to send us? We do need to sew this up. It would be good to sew it up by tomorrow, close of business as far as agenda items, because we need to put together a packet, and the town hall's closed on Friday. So I did not know if people
The
knew.
only
Yeah.
agenda item I have, Madam Chair, is the one I emailed you about this morning, that in connection with the work that the Master Plan Implementation Committee has engaged MAPC to do, there's a request to spend up to $2,500 of our FY21 budget on the remainder of that work. That would be a cap, 2,500. So we'd like to put that on the agenda. The planning board is also putting it on their agenda for next week.
Yes, I already asked Hillary to add that, so that's something that no one else has anything. Okay, very good. We will have a letter, hopefully. One thing we didn't actually ask Judy was, or give her a deadline for the letter for the residences. So we'll have to tighten up that and let her know, so that we can get it to everyone. It would be great to have it by Monday, but I'm not sure she can turn it around, but I'll see what I can do about that. And so we'll be able to review and vote that letter and get it in.
One question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Are we meeting at 7 on the 8th?
Well, that's a question. Would people prefer to meet earlier?
I'm just asking. I'll do whatever.
Yes, Mr. Zulus?
Actually, right now, 7 is a little better now that the office is open again. So 7 is better for me again.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Okay. So we've got that, and here we are. So right now, I'm not sure actually how to do this. We are going to recess this meeting of the Select Board in order to convene a meeting of the Governor Stoughton Trust trustees. Do I actually need to take a vote to recess? That's what I'm asking y'all.
Should we adjourn? We're not coming back, are we?
Yeah.
Oh, we are coming back.
We don't want to
Okay.
adjourn to executive session, so.
Okay.
I'll move that we recess. Sorry. I'll move that we
Go
recess.
ahead.
I'll move that we recess the meeting for the purposes of attending a meeting of the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust, to return to the meeting of the select board thereafter.
Excellent. All those in favor, Ms. Conlon,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Collins, yes, I almost forgot my name. Very good. So we convene this meeting of the Governor Stoughton Trust at 10:03. And we are here to approve and vote to execute an easement agreement for the purpose of emergency access over open space 3, shown on a plan that we looked at last week, entitled the Definitive Subdivision Plan, Milton Woods in Milton, MA, filed with the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds and Plan Books 666 as plan pages 71 through 91 from Pulte Home of New England, Pulte Homes, LLC to Town of Milton, Massachusetts by its select board, acting as trustees under the will of William Stoughton. Mr. Denny, would you like to add anything? Our question last week was about fencing, and we did receive an answer that that was.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So late this afternoon, after a conversation with town council and his consultation of Peter McNulty from their firm, who's done a lot of work in this realm, he identified, in a specific conversation with Pulte's attorney, he identified this specific request made by Member Wells last week about the emergency structure, that the gate, if you will, that needs to be placed on the property. Excuse me one second. So it has been confirmed that the gate and the language, which I'll look up here, I think everyone has received.
Did everyone get it, or would you like me to read it?
It's pretty brief if you could read it. It confirms Mr. Wells's suspicion last week that an emergency gate does need to be placed, separating the Pulte parcel from the remaining 4 acres.
Right. Well, I'll read the quotation marks. Whereas pursuant to the special permit, open space 3 is to contain an emergency access drive over which owner is to provide easement rights to the town for emergency access and daytime public foot and bicycle access in the form of a 12-foot wide all-weather surface constructed with grass pavers extending to the existing impervious surface of the trustee's land and installation of a gate, which will prevent unauthorized cut-through traffic without unduly delaying access by emergency vehicles, and which will permit safe and convenient daytime and bicycle access here in the open space 3 access easement uses. Mr. Dennehy, you are muted if you're saying anything.
Nope, that's
okay.
Madam Chair, I'll read the motion for pleas of the board just to get us to discussion.
Excellent.
So I'll make a motion to execute easement agreement for the purpose of emergency access over open space 3, shown on a plan entitled Definitive Subdivision Plan, Milton Woods in Milton, Mass. Filed with the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds and Plan Book 666. As plan pages 71 through 98 from Pulte Home of New England, LLC to Town of Milton, Massachusetts by its select board, acting as trustees under the will of William Stoughton.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins, yes. Excellent.
Motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, yeah, good man, second.
All those in favor, Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins, yes. I will move to enter executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property as I declare that an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, and this matter considers specifically the Kidder Library.
Second.
All those in favor, Ms. Conlon,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
and we're now in executive session. Thank you, everyone.